This is going to be an expensive trip. What is going on, everybody? Jeff with Where to Next Overland here, and yes, this is going to be a really expensive trip. And I say that because today is day one of a 2-week 2,700-mile overland trip. Well, most of the time is going to be spent off pavement in the backcountry, doing some overlanding and filming our next Overland Adventure series, which I'll get into in just a few moments. But to get there, we have to get from Washington to Southern California, so there's your first hint. But I was just doing the math and I was thinking about how expensive this trip is going to be with current gas prices. And I started to wonder, is it still worth it? Is overlanding still worth it? Especially big, long trips of multiple weeks, crossing state lines. And I say that because I just stopped for gas, and after stopping for gas, I decided to calculate what my fuel efficiency is. And if you know the channel and you know what I'm driving right now, which is a 2000 Lexus LX 470, basically a 100 series Land Cruiser, you'll know that this thing does not get good gas mileage. In fact, that would be probably an understatement. It gets atrocious gas mileage. I just filled up, I did the math, and I'm getting 12.7 miles per gallon on I-5 doing 65, 70 miles an hour. Of course, once we get off pavement, that's gonna get worse. I don't even know what I average off pavement, to be honest, but I know it's pretty well into the single digits. And so for the sake of doing this math, I'm just gonna use 10 miles per gallon as my number. And so we're going to do 2,700 miles, give or take, as I mentioned. 2,700 miles at 10 miles per gallon. That's 270 gallons of gas that we're gonna use on this trip. 270 gallons of gas. And I'm gonna use $5 a gallon as the baseline amount. $5 a gallon, 270 gallons is, I believe, $1,350 in gas. $1,350 in gas alone on this trip is what I expect to spend. And if you're watching this and you're thinking that is an insane amount of money to be spending on gas, well, guess what? I agree with you. It is a lot of money to be spending on gas, but this trip has been in the works for 6 months or so, and we are pretty well committed and honestly super excited for it, so we are going anyway. But I've had a number of conversations with friends and people who I know over the last few weeks who are considering changing or canceling their upcoming overlanding trips for the spring and summer because the gas prices are just incredible. They're insane. And what's gonna make matters even worse for us is we're heading straight into California, Southern California, and we're gonna be getting gas at some of the most expensive gas stations in the lower 48 states once we hit our final destination, which again, I will get into in a few minutes. But I wanna offer a little bit of perspective in this video, and I wanna compare what this trip is going to cost versus maybe a more conventional vacation and see if an overland trip still makes any sense with these ridiculous gas prices. So if we look at the core costs for this trip, I already mentioned the gas price. We're expecting to pay $1,350, give or take, for gas. Well, the other core expense that we have are a few hotel stays, mainly on the drives to and from California, and maybe 1 or 2 in the middle. So I'm gonna call it 4 hotel stays. We'll call it $120 a night for a hotel. So that adds an extra $480 onto the total. So this trip in total is gonna come out to be somewhere around $1,800 for the core costs. I'm not gonna include food or anything because that's gonna be there for any type of vacation that you take. In fact, you could argue that food would be more expensive with a more traditional vacation because we're gonna be cooking, we've got all the food, we've got a fridge, we've got all that, versus eating out every day. So maybe that's actually a point in favor of an overland trip. But just looking at core costs, we're looking at $1,830, just glanced at my notes, $1,830 on this trip. But how does that compare to a similar duration 2-week trip if we were to, let's say, fly into Southern California and we were gonna stay down there for a couple weeks and we're gonna do some sightseeing and maybe we're gonna go see some similar sights to what we would see on this trip? That's where things get a little bit interesting. So I did a little bit of research leading up to this trip to compare what a traditional vacation would cost, so we could compare it to this overlanding trip and see where we stand. So first up is airfare. So to get from Seattle, where we live, to Southern California, I used LAX. Actually surprisingly reasonable. It was about $300 per person round trip. Not bad, right? So that's $600 for Christine and I to get to and from Seattle. And then you got to look at hotel stays. So I'm going to use the same $120 that I used in the overlanding example, but instead of 4 hotel stays, we would be looking at staying 11 nights in a hotel if all things were equal and we were going to fly, because we wouldn't have the transportation time, the 2 days to California and then the 2 days back home. So 11 days instead of the 15 days that this trip is going to be. And so that means 11 nights at $120 a night. That is $1,320 just in hotel stays. So now we've got $1,320 in hotel stays. We've got $600 in airfare, but we're not done yet, because remember, we're flying down there. So if we want to see anything, if we want to go and see some sights, that means in all likelihood we're going to need a rental car. And so a rental car at an average of about $50 a day, which is a pretty good average for that, is going to be, including maybe a tank of gas, about $600, and it could be more expensive than that. So we've got the flight, we've got the hotel, and we've got the rental car. And so when you add up all of those numbers for all 3 of those, the total there, $2,520. So again, just looking at the core costs, we're not including food, but remember, because we are flying down there, we don't have any food with us, we're eating out every day, so chances are food is actually going to be more expensive on the traditional vacation, but we're not going to factor that in. We're just going to leave it as core cost, $2,520, to do a similar traditional vacation. So now things are looking a little bit better for the overlanding trip. And that's not even including the experiences that we're going to have. I mean, to me, an overlanding trip is just a great adventure. It's going to be a lot more fun than a traditional trip. That's just me personally. But even if you just look at the cost of it, there are some pretty good benefits if you're looking at it compared to a traditional trip. And so what, if any, conclusions can we draw from that? Well, first and foremost, I think it depends on how you're looking at your overland trip. Is an overland trip an alternative to a traditional vacation? Because that's what it is for Christine and I. And so for us, we're actually saving money by doing this trip versus doing a different 2-week trip. We're saving 30%. And so even with the ridiculous gas prices, that's still not bad. And what's even crazier is I did the math to see what would it look like to break even. At what point would an overlanding trip actually be as expensive or more expensive than a traditional vacation? And the answer is it would take $10 a gallon gas. $10 a gallon gas as average for our entire trip to make this trip cost the same as that traditional trip. So is overlanding still worth it? I think from a cost standpoint, you could still make the argument that yeah, it is. It is still worth it. It's still a more budget-friendly way to travel than other types of travel. But I recognize, like, listen, I totally recognize that that's still really expensive, and that spending that amount of money on gas is not something that everybody can do or is going to want to do, and I totally get that. So I'm not trying to be aloof about it, but I just wanted to provide some perspective to show that comparatively, it's still a relatively good bargain, and of course, it's just a hell of a lot of fun. Okay, so I don't know how helpful that was. This is not a super produced video, not as produced as most of the videos that you'll see from this channel, but I just thought it was super interesting. I thought the math was interesting. I kind of geek out over numbers like that. So I guess now that the cat is out of the bag on this trip, I'll share with you guys a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the next couple weeks. I'm picking Christine up tomorrow at the Sacramento airport. She is on a business trip, and so she's going straight to Sacramento. I'm going to pick her up. And then we're going to be going to Southern California for 2 weeks. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to explore the Mojave Road. We're going to explore Death Valley. We're going to explore the Eastern Sierras. We've got some super cool stuff planned, some sights to see. And I'm really, really excited to get out and go filming and explore, and I'm really excited to share it with you all. So for those of you who have been watching the channel, you saw our Epic Overland Adventure series in 2021 through Utah and Colorado, so this will be a little bit similar, but it should be taken up to the next level. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. I know I'm going to enjoy putting it together. And thank you all so much for watching and for supporting the channel. And the next time you see me and Christine, we will be out on the trail. See y'all then.